So yesterday we looked at this slide, which is talking about or telling us what kind of coring process we are doing. Okay, after you get the core barrel from the down from the subsurface, okay, to the surface, with this bit you generate the cores, you bring it to the surface. It's like a barrel, okay, and you lay out on the boxes with the certain depth, okay, then you slab, you divide into two, okay, two parts, like here, okay, in between you slab it, which is called slabbing. Then you lay out, and then with this machine you get the plugs, okay, every other foot or every other 2 foot you make a plug, you generate plugs in this form, okay, and then you send it to the library to measure the porosity permeability. And if you remember, I mentioned that sometimes we need preservation, okay? We put the core, whole core, like this or like this, into these boxes, close it, okay, to avoid the interaction with the air or environmental change on the rock, or to keep the content of the rock inside the rock. So we are going to measure. So this is called preserved samples, okay? And then there's a difference between the plug here and the whole core sample, okay? This is whole core, and then in the laboratory, they measure the permeability from this direction to the other side, which is going to be vertical permeability, and in plug, because they slab it and get in the other direction, which is horizontal permeability, okay? It measures the horizontal permeability. So you have to pay attention what kind of data you are getting from the laboratory. Okay, next slide. This is related to the seismic. It's a section, cross-sectional view of the seismic. And as you know, what we are looking for on the seismic, okay, we have to identify which zone is this zone, or this, or this, or this is our zone of interest, is our formation that we are looking for, okay? So after this identification, then the geophysicist has to pick the top of that formation, okay? So they identify all along the top, they put one point, and then they move the section back and forth in the seismic data, and then they continue for picking of that certain subzone top of, then they combine all the points and then generate the top structure. So one of the challenge for the seismic geophysicists is to define the corresponding formation. This formation or this one is corresponding to the which formation, because as I mentioned before, the resolution, seismic resolution is very low in vertical. So they are getting like one signal every 30 meters. So they cannot easily differentiate which zone is what, which formation. So one of the ways is to look at the outcrop, okay, and then the seismic corresponding interval, and see, for instance, from zone A to zone B, when it is going from this zone to this zone, what kind of signal is generated. So you see, if the contrast is too much, then the signal is strong. Otherwise, it's like this, okay? There is no differentiation, as you can see from this rock. That's what we are getting, okay? But from B to C, we are getting such a strong, okay, high density interval. So it's giving us a good signal. So that's the key in seismic. And if you have the outcrop, where you get your reservoir formation onto the surface at some distance from your field, because of the dipping up to the surface, you might get, okay? It's not every time possible, but if it is possible, it is good to get the pictures of this outcrop, even collect some samples and understand the rock and see how the deformation has happened and so forth. So outcrop is helping us to understand many things. As the data, most of the time, even it is brownfield. Brownfield means a lot of development activity has happened in the field, or green field, which means that no data at all when you go to the field. Okay, so there is always opportunity to collect data. Okay, so you gather data, then the issue how you are going to combine it in your software. Okay, when you input the data into your software, so how you are going to bring them together and then analyze them together. So what you see here in this slide, these are the well locations. These are the wellheads, okay? So each wellhead needs XY coordinates, okay? And then after you get the XY coordinates, you need the TD, target depth of that well, and then you need the trajectory, okay? How the well is penetrated. Is it vertical? Is it deviated? Horizontal wells, okay? You need the trajectory, XYZ coordinates of every step of that well, okay? So you can input to the software and see it. This is what you see is an image, okay? This one. This image showing the rivers, some kind of boundaries, and the sea coast here, okay? And this is the river. So I can see it. Where is my well is on the surface. If I bring this image to the surface, even it would be much better, okay? And this one, in vertical direction, what you see is again an image from a paper of seismic 2D seismic profile. So it is image, there is no data, okay, for this seismic 2D seismic. So what I had to do, I had to scan and then load this image to the software and then put it like this, okay? And put the map like that as an image again, along with the well data, and analyze it. So you have to be very creative when you have been asked to look at the data, analyze it, and then drive some conclusion from it, because data is an issue. Sometimes the format is an issue, okay? It might be in a binary format. It might be in certain format, a certain software release you may not understand, okay? So you have to put it in Excel or text editor, look at it, try to understand, and put it in the right format for your own software if you are using Petrel or any other software, and then load it. After you load, you combine all the data together, and you look at it together in 3D and other views. So we said you have to know when you bring your data to your software, how you are going to analyze, what kind of tools you are going to use it to analyze your data. So here is a histogram, okay? Here is 3D window, well section showing the well logs. This is an intersection window showing different formations. This is a map view. On top, it is showing the contact with this blue line and the well locations here, okay? And this color represents whatever the property you are showing, the scale, okay? This is X coordinates, this is Y coordinates, and there's even a ruler here showing the distance. So in this map, you analyze the map view of well data points along with the contours of the structure. Each of this line is a contour, top structure, and the average, whatever it says here, K is for permeability, average permeability at well locations. So we see this is very high perm, this one is very low perm, and the rest is in between. And to understand what is the value, for instance, this is red, you come to this scale, red means, for instance, 10 millidarcy. Blue means 1 millidarcy, or whatever, I cannot read, it's so small. But this is the reading of this map. And in histogram, you see your minimum data here, maximum value here, and in between, how many range, okay, you divide into how many intervals. Each of these bar represents the percentage here, you can see, percentage of your data falls in this range, okay? For instance, this one between 0 to 7, absolute value of 7, we have 2.5%. From 7 to 15, we have almost 5% of our data. And from 15 to 22, we have 7.5% of our data in each interval, so on and so forth. So this is the histogram. Histogram shows you the number of points in each interval, either by percentage or by normal number, okay? How many points fall in this interval? And then this is the 3D window in well section and intersection well. In intersection well, wherever you are showing, okay, for instance, this point to this point, it shows the cross-sectional view of this structure, okay, if you have the intersection window. So where you are going to put your data, how you are going to look at it, and what are you going to use to show, for instance, this map view. We are using the color as an indicator for our permeability data. So this is a way to show, okay, what's going on in your field. So you have to know how to analyze. Okay, so the next step, we have seen, okay, what kind of data we are getting, what kind of numbers, what kind of displays. So this is all related to the data collection. And after we collect the data, what do we have to do, okay, with this data in your software? So you have the well data, you have the seismic data, you have the geological information, you have the petrophysical information. So you collected all this data. And the data is looking at you, you are looking at your data. What do you do next, okay? So can I get your answer to this WhatsApp group? Just write it down. So after data collection, what do you do with data? Just write it down. Okay, I'm waiting your answer. Interpretation and evaluation of data. Okay, good. Good answer. What else? Then execute it in the plan. Execute how we are going to execute. What are we going to execute? We execute the plan, but we don't have the plan yet because we just uploaded the data. That's all. One of you says interpretation. Interpret, you get the raw data and you interpret. Interpret what? What are we going to interpret? For instance, if you have the seismic data, you interpret for fault or the top structure. And we are sitting at the point, we are getting all the interpretations, like the log interpretation, seismic interpretation to our model, okay, to our data loading process. So one of you says facies modeling and property modeling of evaluated data. And the other one is saying that interpretation of data and make a model. Yes, at the end, we're going to make a model by using that data. But we just loaded the data. What do we do next? So the right answer is, after you load the data, you have to QC your data. Okay, try to see if your data is correct, if there is anybody put some polluted data, okay, and then if you had some problems when you were loading or not. All these things are data analysis, okay? You check, quality check, make sure everything is complete and correct. That's the data QC. After you make sure that you have loaded all the data correctly, then the next step is data analysis, okay? Because when you are loading, you load all kinds of data. you call all intervals. But when you're analyzing, you are responsible from your own reservoir, okay, from the formation that you are going to produce. And it is not the entire depth, okay, entire interval. It's a certain interval from the reservoir top to the base. So you have to analyze the data for the zone of interest, okay, wherever you are interested, wherever is your objective, you have to separate and start cleaning your data, okay, for your formation. For instance, the paleophysicist transfers all the log curves to you. And do you analyze all the log curves? No, because it is maybe from top to bottom. But we are not dealing with top to bottom. We are dealing and interested with only the zone of interest. Formation, that's our reservoir. Reservoir A, reservoir B, reservoir C, for instance, okay? So we have to separate this data, whatever the data may be, low porosity, maybe core porosity. So we have to separate this data and start our analysis on that certain data, okay? And then after you analyze, because you have now cleaned up and then brought only the data within your reservoirs, so you start working on your data to understand your reservoir. How many cycle of porous and denser interval in your reservoirs, and how extended, and what is the distribution of property, and so on and so forth. All these things are called reservoir characterization. So you are characterizing, okay, you are trying to understand the characteristics feature of your reservoir, okay? And reservoir characterization is defined as the process of quantitatively assigning reservoir properties, recognizing the geological information and uncertainty in spatial variability. What is spatial variability? That's the question, okay? So he's saying that geological information, uncertainty of it, plus the spatial variability. Spatial means aerial, okay? Means the property related to the area. So we have a porosity value at one well, and we have to see what the porosity value at the other well, nearest well, or far well, or the porosity variation happening between one well to another well. So we have to look at all these changes aerially, which is called spatial variability, spatial data. The data changed by the geography of the point that's collected, spatial variability. That's called spatial relations. This is the term from geostatistics and geology. So spatial property you have to know, okay? It is important. Because the data is changing, the geology is changing from one well to another well, we have to understand and capture this change in our model, okay? And quantitatively, the value we have to see. What is the porosity at this well, at this interval, and at the same interval on the other well, what is the value? And there's a difference because two wells are in different locations. Of course, the rock is not same. Maybe fine grains are deposited at this well and the coarse grains are deposited on the other well. So the porosity cannot be same exactly. The rock heterogeneity, okay? The properties are changing. Sometimes if the heterogeneity is not too much, if homogeneous deposition happened, then your variability wouldn't be too much. And you are lucky because your reservoir is homogeneous. You can predict the value easily, but it's not the case in the real life. In the real life, you find very heterogeneous reservoirs, okay? And it is almost impossible to predict from one location to another one. And you are supposed to, with your modeling, you are supposed to be predicting all points inside your reservoirs, okay? Because when you are developing your field, you have to drill at the good spots. You have to drain hydrocarbon from those spots, and then you have to calculate all the pressure change, saturation change, by production, what's happening. Yeah, so these are challenging issues, so you have to capture the characteristics. Why reservoir characterization is needed? To interpret and evaluate complex internal reservoir architecture and property, as I explained, okay, because the nature imposes heterogeneity and you have to interpret, otherwise you cannot calculate. Why do we need reservoir characterizations? To understand the heterogeneity of the reservoirs, to improve our understanding of the geological and petrophysical controls of the fluid flow, dynamic behavior. We have to understand, okay? That's why we need to do reservoir characterization work, okay? Study, data gathering, data loading, okay? And then capture the uncertainty. In our data collection, there are some errors. It is from the tool or human error or the database error, whatever. These errors, we have to understand how much it is happening. For instance, you get your seismic data, okay? And then there is no well in the field, and your manager is asking you to identify a location to drill, okay? So where do you drill? By looking at your seismic data. So this is a question for you to think and write your answer until the next session, okay? We are going to, let's see, stop here because I don't want to continue. It's gonna get more complicated. Let's see this one. Still, we have 5 minutes, okay? But your question, you don't have any well in the field. You have the seismic data. So what do you look to identify the best location to drill? So when you say that this is the good spot, you have to justify, okay? Because of this, because of that, I am asking you to drill here, sir. And your manager look at you, look at your face, and say, yes, you're right, let's go and drill at that location. And then based on your decision, based on your recommendation, company spent several $1 million and drill at that location. If your recommendation based on good justification, good data analysis, so company will be very satisfied. Otherwise, you're gonna waste the time and money of the company, which means your money. If the company doesn't make money, so you're gonna find yourself in the street next day. Yeah, you will lose your job. If the company makes money, earn money, so you strengthen your position. And if you do the right recommendation, the people around you will like you and will want to work with you. Otherwise, I'm sorry to say that, but you are a useless person, okay? People doesn't want to waste their time with you, okay? Immediately, they try to eliminate you. So you have to be very knowledgeable, very skillful, okay, very productive to maintain your position, to maintain your life standard. Otherwise, you will be walking in the street looking around. Although you are an engineer, you wouldn't make money out of the engineering. You have to go other businesses, other professions, and who knows what, okay? So in the past, people were working in a serial order like it is shown here, okay, which is called traditional professional link. Geophysicists and petrophysicists, they were working separately. And then when they get their result, they just send it to geologists, okay? And the geologists work separately with that data. When they get the result, they just send it to the reservoir engineer. And reservoir engineers start working on your data. And then when they find their results, they just send it to the economic evaluation production engineers or the managers. That's all. So it's a serial. The data in and goes one hand to another hand, and to the managers. But now, currently in the companies, you see all the specialists, geophysicists, geologists, petrophysicists, reservoir engineers, they are sitting around the table and talking to each other. If they send any data, any results, they send to all of it. All of them look at together, and with the holistic view, okay, comprehensive holistic view, they evaluate together, they get the result together, they each agree on the results, and then the company makes decision. The management makes the decision based on collective wisdom. Okay, so this is an important term, collective wisdom. It's not individual understanding. The collective wisdom, look at the data, analyze it, and drives result from that, and the management makes decision based on that one. Okay, so that's the current attitude of the companies. Integrated professional teams are working. And then I'm asking you to think about even one step ahead. Okay, not integrated professionals only, also by integrated multi-industrial environment. Okay, so other industries like biotechnology, space science, okay, you can get a lot of benefit out of that one. So that concludes the session. After 10 minutes, I'm gonna see you again. But meanwhile, work on WhatsApp group and write your seismic data analysis, how to recommend the well location. I'll see you in 10 minutes.